Afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We are on wxlive.us, webinar number 18, Saturday, April 7th, 2012. This is an afternoon event so that hopefully we capture everybody. Where are the guys from South Australia?
Gary's in there.
Okay. And so we're not showing the names for the protection of the innocent. And so the polls on the left side, what is your development environment that you're currently using? Not that you bought it and it's just sitting there, but what are you actually using? What's your target platform? So these guys know, whether you're even looking at native apps, and then what SQL databases are you using in your development? I'm the only honest one on the very bottom that says I do not use any at this time. Yikes. Okay.
At least you didn't try to count TPS as a database.
That's true. And as we have this saying, is how about them TPS reports?
Okay, so I'll give it like 10 more seconds on the answer. You guys take a look at what that looks like to you. I'll capture that screen. 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10. So let me go capture that. Oops. Where's my capture? Oh no! Can you capture that screen?
Capture what screen?
These polls. I don't know what happened to my capture.
Well, I can do capture, yeah.
Oh, I know what happened. I turned it off.
I can do it.
Excuse me for a second. Where is my Snagit?
I captured it.
I turned my Snagit off. That's the problem.
I've got it captured.
Okay, capture. Oh, that's what it was. I was updating. And so okay, so I'll put that on the side so we have that as reference. Okay, so I'm gonna close these guys. Close, and close. And I am going to bring this over here. Oh, by the way, do you want to say anything about this introduction and all that, Andy, before we get started?
Yes, it's one of the three amigos or the three stooges, however you decide to reference this. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Glad everybody showed up. We're going to not necessarily talk about which one's better than the other. That's not the purpose of the three. It is to give you informed decisions of not only how it works in a multi-development environment where you can actually build an application that is fairly independent of backend, but also allow you in a secondary area to know what could possibly be your choices for development environment as well as distribution environment towards this is really what we're looking at. So we'll cover both of those areas. Pete Halsted and Ben is the distributor in South Africa for WINDEV. He is obviously the HyperFileSQL. He thinks it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Pete Halsted does Postgres as well as MSSQL, and I do MSSQL, Oracle, MySQL, and I have touched Postgres. So you're going to get a fairly good overview of different databases that we have used with WINDEV as well as Clarion in the past, both of them. How things work, how you can be independent of databases as well as cover clients' necessities. What are you looking for? Because not all of them are the same, obviously. So we'll get into that discussion. And say hi.
Go ahead and share your screen while you're chatting.
Oh, I can do that now? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
So I'm going to take away the chit-chat and take away the chit-chat.
We should be looking at my analysis at the moment. Isn't that correct?
There we go, yes.
Okay, so everybody can see my analysis at the moment. Bottom line is, as developers, in my opinion, there's probably a couple of different types of developers. There's the independent developer. Actually, 3 types. Let's go 3 types. The independent developer that is either a consultant or writes a certain release of programs that they have out there, and they're currently making their money off of that. There is the small to medium business developer that is belonging to a company and helps maintain either an internal program or a resale program. And then there's the corporate developer. Corporate developer obviously is looking at more of the bigger iron, bigger people, and more dollars to play with. Development of databases, or databases that are available to be used, and I'm speaking more generically of both sides of this, both Clarion as well as the WINDEV group, is the large iron. You're looking at MSSQL, you're looking at Oracle, you're looking at Postgres, which is their EnterpriseDB, is what they call it. Those are the more mainframe iron jobs. The small to medium businesses will be looking at, or do look at, things like MySQL, MSSQL Express, MSSQL Standard, one of those two, depending upon their size. They usually don't get into and Postgres as those 3. And then when you're looking at the independent ones, then you're looking at MSSQL for Express, or you're looking at Sybase as another one that's out there, which we're not really going to get too far into. MySQL for Linux development and web development, as well as we're going to discuss HyperFile CS, or HyperFile Client Server, which is the native basis for WINDEV that has a lot of promise. It has a lot of the feature set of SQL, not 100%, but it does have a lot of it. And if you're an in-house developer, where most of your things are done in-house and you're not already an expert in some other things, obviously it should be on the plate for consideration, since the cost is nil. Okay. Development-wise, and believe me, my cohorts should chime in whenever it's necessary. Development-wise, what we always strive to do is to develop programs that are independent layers above and away from our file layer, as for lack of a better term. You want to make sure that your database layer has enough wherewithal in it to handle different items coming at it from different areas, so they can handle the referential integrity, they can handle the database integrity, as well as your data flow. And then the programs written over it can be either 1 or 2 tier programs, which they go into what they call the 3-tier architecture, where you have your interface layer, you have your programming layer, and then you have your database layer. I kind of consider the first 2 tiers as part of the programming environment, and the final database layer tier as the database part of this. You want to say that I could do that in C#, I can do that in Clarion, I can do that in WINDEV, I can do that in mobile dev, I can do it in web dev, I can do it in a multitude of Fortran, whatever, based upon whatever we want to throw at .NET, whatever we want to do it with. And that's really what you call the pinnacle, that the two should be somewhat separate. Always keep in mind, though, that each database and each database ties has certain idiosyncrasies that belong to that database. So if you are going to develop a system that is totally database independent, you have to go to the lowest common denominator. You have to go to absolutely certain data types. You have to go to I would say around the SQL 92 or 99 level syntax, using those, and stay away from items and areas that may conflict from one database to another. Okay, so from the simplistic standpoint, you can do that. It's not very hard. It's not very hard to do that at all. It's just it's a matter of not getting too fancy, obviously. Okay. What WINDEV does, and WebDev as well as mobile, is they separate the analysis or the layers away from the database. This is an analysis you see right here of a simple project that we have up here on open source, available if anybody wants it. It's Project Pro. What the Project Pro does is it gives you a feedback module written in WINDEV that you can apply into your program, and so you can do it as a .NET or a WINDEV WDK, and you can utilize it to send information back from your end users back to your system and allow them to allow you to manage the projects that are out there. And I'll show you a little bit of how the thing looks in the end result. This started out as MSSQL. Right at the moment, we have set up to where we're getting it from the registry, and we can set it up either as an ODBC connection, we can set it up as a Postgres, we can set it up as MSSQL, and we set it up as HyperFile client server. And I'm going to be working also on the MySQL version for a Linux version of this product. Basically, what you'd be able to do is actually run this product on Linux, okay? Because you can compile this as a Linux module. So we're independent. We've coded it to where we're totally independent of the database, and the way we've done that is that even though I imported this as SQL Server, as you can see, the description of the data files and things are generic. We don't put DBO in front of any of the names of the external names. We don't do anything like that, and we set them up accordingly. What happens from the data dictionary or the analysis, as we see here, is that the connection is independent of the database. So whatever we have in the database stays there. Everything is fine, and our connections are totally different. From this, we can generate a UML structure, a UML diagram, as well as all the class code necessary to have that middle layer in classes to be able to generate. There was a WX Live, I believe it was last weekend or the weekend before, that took our friend from Australia, and he showed how he used the analysis, went through the class code, generating the class code through the UML, or actually had a bunch of class code, and was using that in each of the windows, each of the table functions, and things like that, including a looper. And that was absolutely fantastic the way it looked. I mean, it was a great job. When we're looking at some of this data and some of these items, we can certainly show the layer of the database. Now, what this is here, as you can see, this is actually live data straight from the database already. WINDEV has the ability to do what they call a live update, which allows you to see the data, see how it looks as you develop your program. So you can go in there, add a few things to it, and you see what comes up as you work it. And then when you hit F9 to manage it or run it a little bit, then you're actually looking at the data within the project. And that's probably one of the great features that I see about this, is that live data feature that it is. Now mine is an MSSQL, so it's automatically, and this is the cool part, even though we do have this thing set up this way, because of the project code and the way we've done it, is that it knows that I'm MSSQL, even though Pete is Postgres, and it will show the live data accordingly between the two. Okay, that's what it does. So if I was using Pete's Postgres and I'd changed my registry to use Postgres, then I would be showing the the data out of Postgres. If I had it to HyperFile client server, then I would be showing the data directly out of HyperFile client server. Okay, and that's really the cool part, and it's totally separate. Go ahead.
Andy, can you show us where the connections are set up and how you can manage them by activating the connections or creating them at runtime?
Right at the moment, we have set up a window to do that, and if your registry is empty, in other words, it doesn't have a setup, it's going to give you 3 drop lists. And let me run this. I think I should be able to run it. Then what I have here is I can drop it down. I've got the HyperFile. I can choose whichever one I want: Microsoft SQL, Native, HyperFile, ODBC, and Postgres. ODBC is so that way if you want a really, really good TPS version of this project, you can actually do TPS version if you really wanted to. Anyway, you set up your server. Arnold, go for it. You set up your server connection, your database, your user ID, your password, and when you hit the test, obviously what it does is say, okay, I've got a good connection, and when you hit the apply, what it does is it writes that to your registry and then picks it up every time it comes back in. Okay? And that's all that's necessary. If I was going to change it to HyperFile, then I would have to change my server and information to it. And what happens here is inside the apply button, what we do is we go update the registry, which is a little bit of code that all it does is set up and add each one of those items to our registry. And we're done. Okay? The test connection is very simple. It is a combo. We're going to switch between the combo to see which one we have, and we're going to set up the appropriate connection information. As long as it's not ODBC, we're setting up the user, password, database, access, how we're going to do it, cursor options. Otherwise, we're going to test the connection, and if everything's cool, then we're off and running. Otherwise, it's not. If we've got HyperFile, we're going to go check to see if we need to create any of the tables. If we got any of the tables we need to create, then we create the tables on the fly. So you don't have to know the table structure either, with the exception of Postgres, MSSQL, or MySQL. You'll have to know the table structure, which we do have the scripts for that. But as far as HyperFile's client server, it'll create the files for you on the fly. Okay? All fairly straightforward. Okay? Any questions about that? Anybody have any questions about that? Okay? All right, we're good. That's how you set it up. So when you first operate the program, the first thing that's going to come up is this right here, which allows you to set up your connection however you do it, whether it's to your own database or not. Fairly straightforward. Okay. Program-wise, just to run it.
Andy?
Yeah.
Yes, just at this point, maybe at this point in time, Andy hasn't created any interface layer via code or anything. These commands and these options that's available to him is standard part of the runtime. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct. Standard part of the runtime. The only interface that I've done is created this to be able to set that up. That's the only interface that was created. But as far as getting to the database or doing anything with the database layer, there is nothing more than a connection information so far. That's it. Okay. So basically at this point, we've got the project. We can then go through and look at different pieces of the project, looking at different parts that we want, and see all of the different code that we've been working with. All fairly straightforward. I'm assuming, Pete, that you have this running on your machine on Postgres. Am I correct or not?
No, I haven't been using it.
You haven't been using it.
Tweaking it.
Okay, I got you. It would have been nice, Pete. You know.
Yeah, I know. You know, I'm a project manager, and I've got one really lazy programmer working for me. So
yeah, it must be named Pete.
yeah, trying to get the guy to do anything is pretty tough.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. Anyway, the key part about this, and I may let Ben talk a little bit about it going through it, is that the layers being separated like that is that the browse list that you saw there, the project dashboard or this browse list, absolutely does not know anything about the database. All it knows is about the information coming through that middle layer, and that allows you to fully expand your basis of a product that you may be building. One of the things that as an independent developer we all run into is that you develop it in Postgres. You go in there and you got a client in there that says, oh, well, we don't want to do that. We got a Microsoft. So if it's not Microsoft, we don't want to use it. Or you go into another client and they say that, oh, we're an MS shop. So if you're not MS, we don't want you in here. Or you go to another guy who says, I can't afford MS. You're going to have to figure out something else. And we're all Linux, so we have databases in MySQL. Well, if you develop the product properly, or if you develop the product independent of the database layer, then you can obviously at that point don't care. You say, well, here's the scripts to fire it up in your database. Merry Christmas, enjoy yourself. Let's go off and run it. Okay. And some of the biggest systems are written using MSSQL and Postgres as one, FogBugs, which is a huge system for bug tracking, is an MSSQL and is a complete MSSQL backend for one. Okay. MSSQL wise, wrong button. Let me get to that database. This is all fairly straightforward.
So
the databases
themselves. So are you going to start talking about MSSQL specifically?
I'm ready for the boys to kick off their deal on Postgres and all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh man. So, but you going first with MSSQL?
No, I'm ready to just interject. You know me. I just
let's see your slides, Andy.
Yeah, my slides. You know, somebody had to work. Somebody had to make up for that lazy programmer that you have,
okay.
Pete.
Do you want to let Ben or
Yeah, let's go ahead and let Ben take over, so that way we can pick. Well, actually, let Pete, because he mouthed off first.
Okay, so let's make.
Since he has all these fancy slides that he cut and pasted from the web.
Okay, let's request the share of his screen, and let's cut you out. Let's make Pete presenter. Okay, there we go. Ooh.
Close down a few things that were running. I was really working.
Yeah, right.
Well, we put a little pressure on him, because before you got on, so.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Oh man, you did a lot of cut and pasting.
Leave him alone.
Yeah, well, I didn't do pretty pictures. Okay, so we're going to talk about Postgres, and there's basically two. There are others, but there's two main versions of Postgres. You've got the open source free version of Postgres. Like any other open source project, it's out there. A lot of contributors, typical open source type project. Postgres, especially in the last couple of years, has really started gaining some ground in the enterprise arena. It really is the only open source enterprise level database. MySQL is definitely making strides and and rattling a saber, but they're not quite there yet for the enterprise. Postgres, one of their claims to fame, good or bad, is they are most likely the most ANSI 2008 compliant. Microsoft has just now started coming around to being any kind of ANSI compliant. Where are they at now, Andy? Are they ANSI 95 compliant, or?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, they're getting there. Oracle has started realizing they need to be ANSI compliant. The last couple of releases of Oracle have started, you know, getting away from all their custom commands and getting into the standard SQL syntax. So everyone's getting there. Postgres, from the very beginning, since they're kind of young, they started out as ANSI compliant, and there's some advantages and disadvantages to that. Some of the things Postgres does to be ANSI compliant are things that none of the other databases do because they're not. And case sensitivity, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is one of those things.
Which will drive you nuts.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that PostgreSQL with the ANSI 2008 compliance has is some of the modern statements that some of the other databases are just now starting to get into. Limit and offset statements. You can write a select statement. Would have been real handy back in the days of Clarion browsers. You can actually say select my data. Give me 150 records. Next time I issue the statement, give me another 150 records, offset by 150, so I can grab slices of the data instead of grabbing the entire data set.
Yeah, you can do that in MSSQL if you're willing to jump through a few hoops. I've done it.
Exactly. That's some of the stuff that they've just started coming around.
It's paging is what it is. It allows you to page through the result sets. Right.
And then windowing functions are some of the new data warehouse type functions that I will admit, being old school, I just haven't taken the time to learn them and see what their uses are. Most of that stuff I can accomplish through subqueries or some other method, but they're there if you want to use them. The biggest difference between Postgres and a lot of the other databases is how it implements locking. They do what they call multi-version concurrency control. Big fancy words. I like to say it means the end of deadlocks. What it does, and the easiest way to understand it is the motto that kind of goes along with it is readers never wait on writers, writers never wait on readers. Most databases with any type of page, row, table locking, a reader can cause a lock that will cause a writer not to be able to write.
Yeah, unless you use hints.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
With the way Postgres works, without any thoughts of locking, I never have to worry about that, because what they do is they call it shadow copies. In the database, when I say, hey, I want to read this record, it snapshots that record as I'm reading it and allows the actual record to always be available for a writer to update. In other words, it's a dirty read implementation without me having to do anything. Now, there's things I can do to tell it that I want to do traditional locking if I need to. The thing is, by default, it implements this method of me never having to worry about locks. And in 99% of your coding, you really don't have to worry about dirty reads. You know, it's very little true business level coding do I need to worry about a dirty read. You know, I don't care that a record was changed 10 microseconds ago. I don't need that level of updates. But again, it supports the traditional locking if you need to, but out of the box, you just don't worry about locking. You just don't have to No specific coding, no no locks, hence anything like that. You just go on about your life. Stored procedures, you can write them in 9 different languages. Perl, Java, you name it, you can write in it. It uses sequences
PPS?
for, maybe not that.
Okay, just checking.
Well, what's the most popular language they use for stored procedures in Postgres?
It uses its own version of PL/SQL, which is derived from Oracle.
It's not overly unstandard. I mean, T-SQL is what MSSQL uses. PLSQL, Oracle. This is a derivative of PLSQL. Most all of them have the same conventions that we're all used to, if then else statements. Do they do switch in there, Pete? I don't know if they do switch or not. Yeah, they do switch. They do have a couple advantages in Postgres that I have not seen in other ones yet, with the exception of Oracle, and that is a data source. Basically, you've got the ability in Postgres to, in essence, set up your own data source, do select into it, and process those just like you do in a program. So it's that was pretty neat.
Yeah, and your stored procedures can actually return a table. So you can actually pass your data set around. So you can do some very, very heady stuff if you want to. It uses sequences for auto incrementing. I think MySQL uses sequences too, doesn't it?
Either one. It uses either one because you can in essence set it up almost like an identity. Yeah. Sequences is a derivative also of Oracle stuff. That's what a lot of what Postgres reminds me of.
Yes. MSSQL, it obviously does auto incrementing. The thing I like about sequences is it exposes the auto incrementing to you as a developer a little more. I can go out, look at the sequence, change the sequence, talk to the sequence directly, and do some tweaks to the auto incrementing for special cases if I need to. Where with something like MSSQL, it's going to fully manage that itself and not really let me get into it. It's more of a black box.
But you've got 2 advantages also with that, Pete. Number one is that on an insert you can actually bypass the sequence.
Exactly.
And insert whatever field you want in order to do that in
MS. The set identity off, set identity on.
Right. I was supposed to say MSSQL you have to set identity off, do the insert, and then set identity back on. That's the only way to get around it. So sequences has been an excellent deal for years.
Is there any built-in triggers or something where I can use what do you call that? GUIDs?
GUI IDs?
Yeah, create the GUIDs in here.
Yeah, there's actually data types in Postgres for GUIDs.
Yeah, MSSQL, all 3 of them have that data type.
Okay.
The other strange thing about Postgres that I haven't used it in a lot of instances, but it is an OOP-based framework, which is a very foreign thing to a SQL environment. For the most part, data has never had the need or had anything to do with OOP. You can actually inherit your table definitions. You can create a customer table and then inherit that to a special customer table that has all the fields of customer plus some additional fields. You can create custom data types and operator functionality. And we'll actually see some of that when we talk about the case sensitive stuff, where I've done that to get around some of the case sensitivity issues. You can also do function overloading on stored procedures. You can have the same stored procedure with additional parameters or different data types for the parameters and let all that work in conjunction with each other. And then from the DBA security standpoint, there's things like partitioning, clustering, write-ahead logs, SSL support, So a lot of those things are things that your enterprise DBA guys are going to want. So that's the general PostgreSQL. Arnold's favorite slide. Why use Postgres? Because I said so. Did I mention it's free?
Who's the I?
Me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Pete said so.
Yeah.
Because Pete said so. Not
exactly.
Because Pete said so.
So now Postgres the bad. Case sensitivity. You talk about Postgres, it's the first thing anyone asks. But what about the case sensitivity? This is where I said respecting the ANSI standard makes Postgres sometimes a pain. The ANSI standard says case sensitivity is the standard. So they obeyed the standard, we get case sensitivity. What a lot of people don't know is there's two different types of case sensitivity in Postgres. First, in your actual table definitions and all that, there's case sensitivity there. If you define a table as uppercase C, lowercase customer, and then you try to write a statement in WINDEV Clarion that says select asterisk from customer all lowercase, it's going to say, I don't know where that table is. Because you used an uppercase C when you created the table, it made that table name case sensitive, so you have to use it in that case sensitivity. Now, if you define everything as lowercase, then it's case insensitive. So in other words, if I create my table as all lowercase customer, then I can say select asterisk from all uppercase customer, and it'll find the table. So it's a big deal, but it's not. As long as you create everything in lowercase in your database, the case sensitivity of tables and field names goes away. So that's the DDL side of things. Now, where it becomes go ahead, Arnold.
I just want to make sure I understand. So everything in the on the database side is all lowercase, but you can do camelback or upper or capitalize whatever on the dev side, like on the Clarion or the
SQL side when you do the select.
Exactly. It's just your database create statements in the database that need to be all lowercase.
Your readability suffers when you're looking at the database itself because if you're used to an upper lowercase, writing capability, each major part of a label is upper and lowercase mix, and you keep everything as lowercase for this, then it does suffer a little bit. Your eyes have a tendency not to look like they used to. You have to get used to it.
So do you, instead of camelback, do you use underscores or something to make it more readable?
I don't, because I hate underscores. Most of us that type at a high rate don't like using special characters because it slows down our typing. It's something that, after you get used to it. I read my field names fine. I use 20 and 30 character field names, as Andy can attest.
Yep.
Doesn't bother me at all. The biggest challenge for me is when I swap scripts back and forth with someone like Andy that, is sending me an MSSQL script with mixed case, and I've got to convert it all to lowercase when I create it on my side, so I don't have issues. So it's one of those things that, if you're going to use Postgres on a daily basis, becomes a non-issue pretty quick. It's just something you got to be aware of. The bigger issue is the actual case sensitivity of sorts and compares when you're talking about strings.
The data.
Exactly. That's where it becomes more of an issue. Capital A is not the same thing as lowercase a. All of us that have been using MSSQL for years didn't know that. We thought they were the same thing. Turns out they're not. How do you solve it? Well, first question is it that big of a deal? The first thing to think about is, it seems like a big deal until you really start thinking about it. How many operations and fields in your database do you really do string comparisons, lookups, and sorts by alpha? Your initial answer to that is probably a lot, but when you really get down and look at it, it's not. Most of us are doing everything by sysids. The only thing that you're truly sorting by alpha is customer name, a few fields like that. So when you really look at it, it's probably 10–15% of your data operations are really doing anything that case sensitivity would even affect. So once you realize that and get your head around it, now there's some different ways that you can solve it. The sorting issue can be solved very easily by using locales. When you create your database, set up your Postgres server on your server, if you define a locale that's case insensitive, your sorting will be case insensitive. Now, the purists will say that there are some performance issues with using a locale other than the standard C locale. You know, I'll leave that for the DBA guys to argue out and fight over. You know, us programmers just want an application that's going to work. You know, I don't really want to talk about, you know, when I'm selecting 800,000 records, that it's going to take 10 microseconds longer. I don't care. My user doesn't care. So that the sorting issue is not that big of an issue. String comparisons are a little more of an issue. Again, if I say select asterisk from table where customer like A, or you know, like a %, Apple with a capital A is not going to pass the test if I had lowercase a %. That is an issue. Now there is a non-case sensitive like statement that you can use in Postgres. Problem is you're not going to use any indexes or anything when you use statements like that, and that's going to cause you some true performance issues. So how do you get around that? Well, the way I did it in South Carolina was I created what's called functional indexes. This is another ANSI 2008 thing that I don't think any of the other guys are really doing it as of yet. I can create an index that is not just based on a field, but is actually based on functions and aggregates. So let's forget about case sensitivity for a minute. Let's talk about, I want to sort my orders by the order amount. Order amount is not stored in my table. It's calculated based on quantity times unit price. I can create an index that does that math. So now when I say select from order by, and do that math in my order by statement, it will actually see that index, that functional index created that way, and use that index. Now, how I'm using that with case sensitivity is I create a index, a functional index that is uppercasing my alpha field. So now everything is uppercase for that index. So now if I say select from customer, upper customer name equals a %, it's going to use that index. Everything's going to be great. Now, I converted a very large MSSQL application to Postgres. I had code everywhere that I didn't want to have to go in and retouch and put all these uppers into all my string comparisons and so forth. Remember when I told you Postgres is OOP-based? You can actually override the operators. So what I did was I actually went in and overrode the operators. And I will show you where I did that. I actually overrode the string operators so that when it does a varchar comparison, it uses my own custom functions instead of the standard function. And in my custom functions, I'm doing uppers on them so that it's always doing an upper comparison when it does a varchar comparison. That combined with the functional indexes more or less turned Postgres into an MS-SQL style behavior.
There's only two databases right now that have the functional indexes, or the functional that he's talking about, and that is Oracle and Postgres. There is a note out there to attempt to try to get it into MySQL, but so far I haven't seen it. MSSQL, I have not heard it on the horizon at all as yet. I have not heard about it. So the only two, and you can safely say that Postgres is the poor man's version of Oracle, is what you really need saying, and that ain't poor. You know, be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, how poor is that?
Yeah, Postgres itself
it's got a lot of
90% Oracle compatible.
Yeah.
And in my next slide, we'll talk about how to bump that up to 99%.
Hey, Mike Hansen, Skype me, and he said, he asked, what about CI text, case-insensitive text?
Yes, that's a new data type that was just introduced in the, I think it was 9 version of Postgres. I have not played with that, but that is yet another. In the last couple of versions of Postgres, there's been a lot of things that have been introduced, different ways to work around this issue. One of the things I have not explored yet is what does case-insensitive text data types do to external things like WINDEV when it sees them. And last thing I want to say on functional indexes is that's one warning I have to give you. So far, almost every third-party tool that I've used to import a database, look at a database, be it Access, Crystal Reports, WINDEV's analysis import, Clarion's dictionary import, when they hit functional indexes, they blow chunks. They have no idea what they are, and they get really confused. Anything from GPS to importing incorrectly. You know, functional indexes are really cool. They have a lot of great uses, but because, like Andy said, there's only 2 databases right now that are supporting them, not much of the rest of the world really knows what to do with them. So you got to be careful with them. One of the things that we did, because we were using Access for all of our reports, and of course we had to import the table definitions into Access anytime we change table definitions, we actually had a script that would run that would remove all of our functional indexes, import the definitions into Access, then go back and recreate our functional indexes. Otherwise, we couldn't get our import into Access to work correctly. So, you know, if you're going to use functional indexes, just be aware you may run into some issues like that. But again, they have some really powerful uses beyond using them for the case sensitivity issue of being able to create functional indexes on aggregates. If you've got a table where you're constantly ordering based on some mathematical calculations, a functional index is going to give you some amazing performance boost.
Another thing you got to keep in mind. Oh, go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy. I was ending that topic, so.
Okay. The other thing you need to keep in mind is that if you're into or you're working towards a database independent software program, this is where your class creation via the UML on WINDEV comes in handy, because you can test in your class independent of what's being developed in front of that, test in the class what is the client you're using to access the database, and overload the method or you know, deal with specifics for, say, Postgres versus MSSQL towards this, because you're going to have some minor, depending upon what happens. Let's take that new data field, the insensitive text, the CINTX or something like that. I forgot what Mike was saying. If that is supported different than the varchar or the varchar max from MSSQL, then you may have to, in your classes, deal with that. But your end result or your program does not care. It doesn't matter. You don't have to write anything specific for it that way.
Exactly.
And Pete, John Armstrong in the Skype asked if UTL-8 locale sorts correctly in Postgres. I don't know if you.
Again, it depends on your server environment. Some of those locales actually perform different on a Windows server versus a Unix server. And then even within the locales, you have co-locate settings on top of that. It depends on a lot of those settings, and you start getting into possible performance issues and stuff, and it's not an answer that I can give you a this is the way it works answer. You know, it becomes a conversation with your network server guy and your DBA to see how it's going to work in your environment. But
he's talking about sorting correctly.
Definitely solve the question from that side. Go ahead, Arnold.
So the setup on the locale is actually going to mess up your sorting, huh? It could.
That's what locale does. You know, that's the reason Windows works different when I install the Russian version versus the US version. It's because of the locale setting. You know, that's what tells it the alphabetical order of omelette U versus regular U. That's what locale does. But beyond the sorting, there's also the underlying technology of how indexes are created, and you know, you get into the heady stuff of B trees and C trees and different things like that, and that's where you can run into some performance issues of, you know, just because the locale wants to sort it that way, and it will absolutely sort it that way, does not mean that the underlying database technology supports it in a way that's going to be good for performance. So you've got to make sure you've covered it from both angles. Again, it's something that just has to be considered and thought out for your environment. Definitely can be answered, but you want to be aware of it and cover it. You don't want to just go grab it, install it on a server, and go to town. You want to make sure you've considered it and covered it. Another way to handle the case sensitivity, again, like I said, you're not talking about as many fields as you think. The way I've done it in other environments when I've had issues like this, being able to search phone numbers quickly and easy, I create a second field, and I've got triggers that are updating that field, stripping out the special characters. You could do a similar thing with your customer name, strip out the spaces, uppercase it, write it out as a separate field via a trigger, do your sorts and locates based on that. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and it all depends again on what you're doing, what your environment is, what's going to work for you. As you've seen both in John's and Mike's questions, the latest versions of Postgres have come up with some new stuff that has made it even less of an issue. So, you know, it's just, again, case sensitivity is going to be that first thing you hear about when you start talking about Postgres. So explore it and have your answer ready when your CIO asks you the question.
Yeah, MySQL's the same way. It's all case sensitive in MySQL as well.
Yeah. So the bigger hurdle you're going to get, you know, again, we said it's open source, good and bad. The good side of that, we've already explored. The bad side of that is, that's the other thing your CIO is going to say, you know. I've got to have support from a corporation. The old adage, you know, no one ever got fired for recommending IBM. So how do you answer that question? Well, that's where EnterpriseDB comes in. Many of the contributors to the open source version of Postgres actually work at a company called EnterpriseDB. They have their own commercial version of Postgres called Advanced Server. It is 99% Oracle compatible. Performs at 90% of the performance of Oracle at 30% of the cost. Now let's talk about that cost for a minute. Where does 30% cost come from? It's free, right? Yes and no. You still have your cost of ownership. When for Advanced Server, you don't pay a license for using the software, but you do pay EnterpriseDB a support contract to support you. And they have follow the sun 24/7, 365 support contracts. When we moved from MSSQL to Postgres, and to be fair to Microsoft, we were sitting on MSSQL 7 in 2010. It had been a while since we had upgraded. We were facing $150,000 to upgrade to the latest 2005 at that time. 2008 was a little bleeding edge version of SQL. What we did instead with Postgres, we went with EnterpriseDB. I was paying $34,000 a year in support for 2 8-core servers in a version of Postgres that performs damn close to Oracle standards, which, you know, even Andy can tell you, you know, if you're got to have big iron, that is where Oracle makes their bread and butter.
That is a fact. And just talk about pricing of licenses, because this again comes down to, okay, what is the environment that you're working in or the environment that you're working towards?
Exactly.
When you're talking about the corporate mainframe type environment, MSSQL, even now, has got a very high dollar. They're trying to be the Oracle competitor. They are now going in 2012 to a core licensing program, since most of the CPUs now are 2 to 4 cores. You're in essence buying 4 licenses of MSSQL to start. So that $7,000 for a single CPU that you currently got now for standard to start with just became $21,000 because of the four core CPUs. And if you have 2 of those, then you're buying 8. So now you got 8 times 7. Okay?
And the other important distinction there, and this was the distinction that I made, that is the reason that I was able to convince my CEO to go with Postgres, was that license Andy's talking about is just for privilege of running the software.
Yeah, you haven't got any licenses to
dollar
connect
amount,
yet.
Microsoft won't even answer the phone when you call.
No, I will.
Yeah, Andy will, I will, Microsoft won't. With EnterpriseDB, their business model is completely different. Even with their enterprise level of Postgres, you're not paying a license to use the software. What you're paying for is dedicated support from them. So the money that you are putting out there comes with follow the sun 24/7, 365 support.
And Pete and I will still answer the phone for this too.
What about this open source? What about tools that come with MSSQL but not and Oracle? Does Postgres on its
Postgres tools are absolutely better than anything I've seen out there. In fact, we were using. I'm trying to remember. There's two big tools out there that everyone uses for Navicat, and what's the other one called, Andy?
You would tell me I was using Navicat and Database Workbench Pro is another one.
The other one I'm trying to remember has got Enterprise in its name.
I'm sorry, I don't remember right offhand.
But anyway, a lot of folks are using either Navicat or that other one as their SQL Studio. When I moved to Postgres, I quit using all that. Postgres tools, especially the EnterpriseDB one, if you notice down there on the advanced features, the third one down there, debugger. That's right. You have a real-time debugger for SQL with Postgres Enterprise. I can actually step through my stored procedure and trigger code.
Statements and your stored procedures and all that?
I can
MSSQL, both of them have now.
Okay, cool.
Did you say MSSQL now has that, Andy?
Yeah, 2008. You have the debugger.
Okay, yeah, that and again that's the thing that you have to remember. I left the MSSQL world for all intents and purposes at 2007.
Yeah. The other one is Postgres Studio 8. I guess that's all you want to call it.
Yeah. It's still a very good tool. Doesn't have the debugger, a couple other things, but the tools that come with Postgres are absolutely on par with Studio.
I would safely say, out of let's go with the three that is out there, because we haven't really got into HyperFile yet. Ben's been very, very quiet over there. MySQL probably has, in my opinion so far, and this is my opinion, MySQL probably has the worst tools. Okay. I have Database Workbench. There's another one out there. There's a couple of them out there. Basically, there is a lack of standard. I find it very difficult to work with MySQL, and depending upon how it's set up, whether or not you can even get a listing of your stored procedures or your functions that you've created in them is another thing, whether you can even get a listing of them through some of these tools. So I'm not real fond of MySQL's tools that have been with MySQL. Now, if somebody else has been using MySQL a lot and really loves a tool, please post it to me, because I have to deal with it on occasion, and I would dearly love to have something that is a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah, I will say that everyone that I know that's a big MySQL person is either using Navicat or that other product.
Yeah, Database Workbench. Okay. Postgres has got a good one. Don't get me wrong, it's a good one. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it is a fairly good one. Yes. SQL OG for MySQL. Okay, Alan, I'll take a look at that. As far as MSSQL is concerned, the only drawbacks to the 08 version of the editor is that I see with it is that you cannot save partial stuff. You have to save it out to text and then bring it back in. I don't particularly like that. I think that you ought to be able to, say, okay, I got part of this code done, and
the coolest thing in the Postgres one is if you noticed when I was working, this is right, PG Studio that you're seeing now.
Right.
When I click on a table, you're actually seeing the creation script right here.
Right.
MSSQL, you got to go through that extra step of generating out the script or so.
It out.
so forth.
No, there's
Yeah,
there's some advantages
exactly.
to it, but we also use in MSSQL we use the Redgate versioning software in it, and that has been instrumental. It's been pretty good. The Redgate stuff has. I've been very impressed.
Okay, yeah, that's one thing that you don't have in Postgres, and we were doing via text files and checking in, checking out. But yeah, version control of your SQL database is definitely a big deal.
We're going to fix that, ain't we, Pete?
Absolutely. So anyway, there are a few large enterprise features that EnterpriseDB does bring to the table. 99% Oracle compatibility. They have some really heady stuff that you're not going to use unless you are in a very, very large environment. Infinite cache is actually the ability to throw out a couple thousand workstation level servers and cluster them. Most of the databases support clustering, but what Postgres with EnterpriseDB does on top of that, all that RAM on all those machines can now be clustered and seen as one giant set of RAM. No 64 gig limit. I can throw a couple thousand servers out there with 4 gig apiece on them and have all that RAM seen as one giant chunk of cache.
So basically, as you destroy a machine and put it off to the boat anchor status, you can just turn that on over there, use the memory in it to add to your Postgres.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I will say there's one other advantage to
things
this.
like that. You can throw some of your old data that you're not going to access that often into a partition in that cluster. You know, again, this is stuff that you're not going to use but maybe 5% of the installations in the world, but it's there if you want it.
One other thing that that I want to add with when we talk about MySQL and Enterprise, they will run on a Linux machine. So you can reduce your cost and reduce your and increase your performance by getting off of MSSQL 2008 or 2003 servers, which you cannot really do in MSSQL at all. But if you're walking into a place that says we must have MSSQL, we must be industry standard, and I know that's going to cause some headaches there, then you work with that. Distribution-wise, and I'm not sure, and that's something Pete will have to address because I've not seen it. Distribution-wise for a commercial product, okay, and we'll get into that for just a moment there before we get over and start talking about the HyperFile client server. So Ben, prepare yourself. MSSQL Express now goes up to 12 to 14 gigabytes of data. We use that with all of our clients. We're running several large stores in the tire industry off of Express. I mean, there's 16 store systems that are running off of Express. So robust-wise, for cheap, that somebody says you got to have MSSQL Iron and stuff. The 2008 version of MSSQL Express seems to do the trick, but you must design with that in mind. Don't design it like you would EnterpriseDB and expect it to run decently in that environment, because it won't. If you design the database to be the database and to do the biggest chunk of the work instead of, say, Clarion or WINDEV, it will run a whole lot faster than not. So your stored procedures, your triggers, and all stuff comes into play. Moving to something else that does a combination of both desktop and web-based, then I would certainly be looking at more of a Linux-based deal, so you can use things like PHP against it. which means that and I'm not so sure how PHP works with Postgres, but I know MySQL works, obviously, since it came from that environment, works well with that. And you can install MySQL on MS-DOS or Microsoft stuff. But I got to say this is that it is not as easy to put MySQL on a Microsoft 2003 server. I still have not been able to connect to mine that I've installed over here on my server. So, but I have done it at both Postgres and MSSQL. Both have worked out fine in doing that. So, installation of EnterpriseDB or the Postgres, there's an any file setup stuff that I remember Pete had to take me through. That's probably the biggest thing in there.
Yeah, and there are actually commercial products using Postgres. One of the largest distributed ones is a Hold'em Manager, which is a poker, online poker management application. It has a couple thousand installations out there. Not saying how I know that, but I happen to know that.
Alan, you and I are going to have to talk about that MySQL working on the 2008 server, okay? Because mine's a 2003 and I'm having fits.
Postgres absolutely can be installed and managed without any interaction on site if you need that in a retail environment.
The biggest thing is anybody has setup builder installations for these tools, let us know. Because right now I've got a complete setup builder installation for 2008 or 2005, 2008 MSSQL both. And Pete has one for 2005, I believe, because that's what Horizon uses.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you have a setup builder installation for EnterpriseDB or Postgres, do you?
No, I haven't bothered to wrap that into anything. You know, they have their own that you can call, obviously, but I haven't bothered to wrap it into one setup deal. But you absolutely can if you need that.
Yeah, it's one of those things to keep in mind, depending upon the application you're attempting to build.
Right. Yeah. You know, if you're developing shrink wrap software, those are some things that you definitely want to consider.
Yeah. Go from there.
So,
Ben?
I think that pretty well takes care of it. Have I used my whole 10 minutes, Arnold?
Yeah. Yeah, you stretched that bad boy out. Let's see. Let's go get Ben here. Make him
wake Ben up.
Ben, I know it's 10:30, 11:15 over there in South Africa, but it's time to wakey wakey.
Wakey wakey.
In case we have any mixed company, we won't complete that little poem.
It's all yours, Ben.
Okay, it's just trying to start this up.
Made you guys all three presenters so you can see how many people we have.
Cool. One of the things that Pete and Ben both can attest to is we need to understand that when you're using WINDEV, you're looking at 3 environments you're working with at the same time. You want to be able to have a layer that's independent, because you can either do it as a desktop application using WINDEV. You want to be able to do it as a web application using the WebDev, and that includes PHP, because if you go to one of my websites, dbamonster.com, that's actually generated PHP from WebDev. And the third one is the mobile device or the mobile programming, which we've done. I've already done mobile programming using the Windows devices. and working on, since version 17 is out, is doing some Droid and iPad, both. And we'll actually be doing some over-the-shoulders watching of how that is developed. So there'll be the whole key about on that is to have the 3 layers. And some of you guys out there have known me for years, as well as Pete. We're going to have to get into some areas when we're talking about the UML stuff and the class libraries and the classes and things like that, of things that we've just really not wanting to do, but we're going to have to in order to do this.
Okay.
You ready,
hear me
Ben?
out there?
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. I'm not sure what happened there. It decided that the webinar should reboot on my machine, but we're all up and going again. Okay, as some of you might know, we took a leap and became the PCSoft products reseller distributor in South Africa, and as such, a lot of my clients come from an environment where they are single developers running a very small business, creating 1 or 2 smallest products, which goes into smaller companies, and most of them are using the default database system or file driver that comes with their development environments, and for Clarion that is TPS files. And for this, PCSoft as a comparative product, and they call it a HyperFileSQL system. So we've got a very nice TPS type file driver, which is part of the development environment and part of the runtime, which is obviously royalty free to the developers to redistribute. And as such, it becomes a very popular way of storing the data for your smaller clients. And we're not talking about enterprise level clients here. We're talking about small and medium businesses. And in South Africa, for instance, a small and medium business is anybody that has 30 or less clients, or 2.5 million rand turnover, which is what, 200,000, 300,000 US dollars, something to that effect. Okay, just quickly before I get into the actual HyperFileSQL details, I just want to expand on a few things that was touched earlier on. When we look at an analysis, part of the analysis is the ability to define multiple connections for that same analysis. So we could define a connection which is a, let's call it a, let's make this a new one. And I will associate all the files with that. I won't copy the data over. And what I've just done is I've created a single analysis, and all my files are HyperFileSQL and client-server model. What I could go and do is, in my connections, I could actually go and create another connection, which is to an external database, which is Oracle, SQL Server, whatever, or HyperFile Classic. Now you will see HyperFileSQL Client Server and HyperFileSQL Classic. If you want to equate that to TPS, the HyperFileSQL Classic would equate to TPS files, and the HyperSQL File Client Server would equate to TPS files with the IP driver layer over it, which takes away the shared connection mechanism of connecting and introduces a TCP IP method of connecting between the client and the server. But that's not how basic the HyperFile Client Server is, because it's actually a SQL engine which is running on top of the classic files, and it's called the Mantra server. So if we want to go and have a quick look at that, we've got a control center here for the HyperFileSQL, and the actual server which makes available the ports and the TCP/IP connection from the server side is called the Mantra server, and in this instance it's a 64-bit Mantra server which I'm running on my machine, well actually on the server, and let's just log into that. And immediately I can see the server is a SQL 2008 R2 server, which is obviously only in 64 bits. The engine is a 64-bit. I've got 8 megs of RAM, and it's a 2.8 gig drive. These are the DLLs and their versions, which forms the Mantra server. I can go and have a look at connections, which is to that server. I can look at the configuration, general configuration, log files. I can actually go and look at what databases is on the server. I'll get to that now. Which users are on the server, which groups they belong to, what rights every user has. And one of the things we should remember here is that these rights are on a server level, on a database level, or on a table level. We don't have the granular rights down to column level like Pete has shown us on his side. We can have a look at what transactions are in progress, the logs and statistics. We can schedule events, backups, those types of things. And here's the dedicated backup system for HyperFileSQL. If we decide to go look at the databases which is on the server, we can see the different databases, and for every database we can have a look, and I'll go to a database that's actually got some data in. We can have a look at the logical names of the tables. We can look at their sizes, the number of records, and so on. Once again, the connections to those databases, if there's any locks on them, we've still got the SQL query where we can run a query against that database. We can look at the backup for that database, and then we can go and do maintenance on these databases by deleting inactive record or cross records, damage records, set the density of the indexes, do some certain types of optimization, and most of this can be live. You don't have to take the database offline. And then we can go and look at the rights set up for the different users against these databases. We could also assign database owners. Now this is just a quick interface. Oh, and obviously what we could also do on the databases, we could go look at any links that are set up, stored procedures which are set up on the databases, any triggers that's on the databases. We could go and adjust those triggers here. So these triggers are truly database related triggers, are not application triggers or coded into the application like I think most of us are used to. That comes from a non-SQL environment. Stored queries, we could actually create queries and store queries directly inside the database and then use that and set up parameters which we could use as well. Okay, so I'll quickly run through the capabilities of mostly the Mantra server in relation to the HyperFileSQL, but we will look at HyperFileSQL as well. So let's do that right from the beginning, and we will start this. Now what I've done is I've created a few ideas onto this sheet which I will discuss. Okay, the first thing that we will do is we will quickly look at the HyperFileSQL maximum capacity. Columns per table 65K or 64K, indexes per table 64K, rows per table 239 million of billions. Now, I don't know how to pronounce that any other way. Table size, 4 million terabyte. Row size, 2 gigabyte. Column size, 65K. And blob size is 4 gig. One thing to remember is inside HyperFileSQL, it asks you, do you want to limit your table sizes to 2 gig, or do you want to allow the table size to expand beyond 2 gig? For most of us, it's a no-brainer. I'm not going to limit my stuff to 2 gigs if I could go over that. And it's stable, and I've tested it, and I've worked with it, and it works beautifully. Objects bigger than 2 gigs, table sizes bigger than 2 gigs. No issues with it. One of the strengths of HyperFileSQL is the fact that PCSoft has based their whole development environment on the HyperFileSQL, not the client-server part, but what they call the classic, which is compatible to or comparable to TPS files. And when you work in the PCSoft development environment, you will find that things happen very fast. There's fast updating of information. It's masses and masses of information. And what they're doing is they are using this HyperFile Classic. Oops, let's just go back one there. They are using the HyperFile Classic database type, and they just rename it to WDW for a Windows description or whatever, but it's actually a HyperFile Classic table which they are using. Now, HyperFile Classic tables can run on mobile devices. It can run on Linux, Windows, Macintosh, iOS like the iPad and the iPhone, Android, Windows Mobile, and Windows CE. Those are all places where if you are compiling an app with the PCSoft runtime, you can also install the HyperFile Classic files there, and it will work, and it will read them, and it will write them. The HyperFileSQL system also comes in a client-server model, which is this, the Mantra server on top of the HyperFile Classic files, and that runs on Windows and Linux, 32-bit and 64-bit. iOS, like iPhone, iPad, can read and write directly to a HyperFileSQL client-server installation via Wi-Fi, or via, let me just get that, via Wi-Fi, or it can, I haven't got it now yet. I can just remember that one of the ways that iPhone and iPad can connect to HyperFile's client server is via Wi-Fi connections, which means that you could actually connect to your enterprise database in your environment with your iPhone or your iPad directly. You don't have to have the database on your device. So your application can access that directly. One of the other benefits for small developers and small companies which can't afford $20,000 worth of SQL system, or don't have the ability to pay for the support contracts for EnterpriseDB, is the fact that because their development environment runs on HyperFileSQL, it's something that's known to them, and it's easy to manage, easy to distribute, royalty, runtime free. What they can also do is they could, for instance, create data tables and include those tables inside the executables, and when the executables run, the executable dumps the data table onto the device or the machine where it's actually running. So you don't have to distribute extra data files with your executable. The data files are actually included inside your executable as an object, which gets extracted and saved to disk when it runs. One of the other nice things about the HyperFileSQL is that it's got a built-in replication, and this replication happens not just between HyperFileSQL servers, but between any type of connection to a HyperFileSQL, be it HyperFile to Oracle, to SAP, to AS400, to MySQL, to mobile. And we can also see that the media could be locally or via a network, a modem, internet, Wi-Fi, GPRS, any type of connection that can carry a TCP/IP connection can be used to do this replication. The replication can also be live or hot or delayed. Yes. Question?
Ben, can that go to that synchronization? Can that sync to a ODBC also?
I'm not sure about ODBC, but I don't think so. The problem with ODBC is that, like Andy said,
you're not going to be able to sync to your TPS files.
Yeah, like Andy said previously, ODBC has to make use of the lowest common denominator, and sometimes, as we all know, that amounts to just about unusable stuff. I haven't physically tested to ODBC. It hasn't been published in the documents as far as I've seen. It's more than likely that it should be happening, but I haven't seen it myself. Okay, another thing with HyperFileSQL is that internally it can keep automatic data modifications that's happening during setup, and it keeps the last 100 versions of data modifications that's taken place. And when we're talking about data modifications, we're talking about the FM3 type data modification, where when you develop a setup program for your program, the setup program can do automatic changes to the table structures, and it then also automatically adjusts the data to fit that new table structure. And it keeps inside the HyperFileSQL database, it actually keeps the last 100 versions of data changes and modifications which has taken place. Another very interesting feature here is frame compression. When you're running normally on a LAN or something like that, you're looking at 100 megahertz, a gig system. And you don't really have problems with data traffic. But let's say that your server and your clients are separated from each other by a internet connection, a DSL connection, something to that effect. Then you have the ability to actually switch on frame compression, and the internal frame compression algorithm can create data packets which is up to 95% smaller than without frame compression. That obviously helps a lot with speed. There's other mechanisms to also help with those types of speed issues where you want to transfer less data, but frame compression is one of those things which actually takes your TCP/IP packets, well, looks at what needs to be sent, compresses that before they are packaged and sent across the network. Okay, I've talked about table and row level locks, or have I? The locking mechanism in HyperFileSQL is table or row level locks, and the program or the developer has the ability to decide which one should be used. Okay, the server, DB and table level writes I've talked about, and I've shown that. HyperFileSQL, to make it available to the rest of the world, has got two native drivers which it makes available, which is an ODBC driver and an OLEDB driver. The OLEDB driver would typically be used for things like C# or ASP.NET or things like that. And then HyperFileSQL also has compatibility, very close compatibility to SQL 92, and it's also got some unique features of both Oracle and MSSQL built into it. And the reason for that is that when you're looking at HyperFileSQL or you're switching in your WINDEV environment to Oracle or to MSSQL, HyperFileSQL, or any other database, and you do this on the fly, if you were looking at the lowest common denominator, there would be very little that is common between these databases. So PCSoft has made a decision to build Oracle and MSSQL features and capabilities into HyperFileSQL so that when you do switch, you've got quite a lot of features which is available to any database type that you switch to. Okay, HyperFileSQL can also be installed in a cluster mode or a server farm as it's called, and it does share connections, memory, tables, and when it's in a cluster mode you can, and what they call hot replacement, you can take a server offline and replace it with another server, and the cluster manager will integrate the new server and start using it without taking anybody offline. Okay, so that's a quick introduction. It also comes with a diff tool which can compare two tables, their structure or their data, and give you feedback on table or data structure changes which might have taken place. If we go on to the next slide.
Before you go much further, I'll make a statement on this.
Yes.
There is a group out of Kentucky that uses a data center in Nashville that uses strictly HyperFile's client server, and it is a large scale system. A lot of web-based web dev and web-based development listed out of it, but he has a very large amount of data all in HyperFileSQL in a server farm. So it is not necessarily just built like this is the native driver, native file format, so use it accordingly for little things. You can expand it to do fairly large scale systems as well.
Yes, Andy, thanks for that.
Go
yes,
ahead, Ben.
I totally agree with that. Most guys, and like Pete also said, is you never get hammered for promoting IBM or MSSQL. So some guys are very hesitant on switching to something else, and that's why the smaller guys tend to use HyperFile, and the bigger guys tend to stick to stuff like MSSQL or Postgres or something like that. You know, where there's let's call it big company or Fortune 500 people that say, yeah, we are using this, you know, that gives authority for other people to use it. But by no means is HyperFileSQL a small system or unscalable. You can use it for major enterprise systems. You just need to have the cojones to do it. Any case, let's go on. One of one of the other things which is very nice about HyperFileSQL is if you're using WINDEV, WebDev, WINDEV Mobile, HyperFileSQL is natively accessed via a lot of functions inside the runtime. For HyperFile functions, there's, for instance, 193 separate HyperFile functions, and remember, most of these functions are level 4, level 5 types of language functions. If we look at the HyperFile client server management functions, there's 96 HyperFile server management functions, which is mantra server functions, like adding users, checking users, deleting users, doing backups, everything out of code. Then there are 8 cluster functions: starting a cluster, adding a server to a cluster, removing a cluster, those types of things. Then there's an external transaction manager. So if you in your code has created a transaction and the transaction's running, and for some reason the transaction never finishes or doesn't roll back, you could actually use an external transaction manager connected to the database, look at the actual transaction that was in progress and roll back that transaction, or continue it, or break the transaction, or whatever you want to do with it. One of the other things which is also very nice is that the HyperFile client server manager has dynamic load balancing. And what I'm talking about with dynamic load balancing is you could decide what type of load balancing should happen for your clients. Now, we all know that there is priority to certain functions that should run and so on. So you could tell the server to give priority to certain functions, or you could tell it to automatically balance the load on the server for whatever is happening, what queries coming in, what applications are connecting. So it's got an automatic mode, and it's also got a priority mode which can be set by the developer. Some of the new features in version 17 which is coming out is instead of having to have a setup program that does your data table changes and your actual data modifications to fit the new tables, you could now do that with a command called hmodifyStructure, and you can do it out of your program in code. So what you could do now is you could distribute your application. The first time it runs, you can make a decision if the database is got to be updated or not, and you can do it in code. And you could, for instance, say, we will update all the HyperFileSQL databases via code, and it equates to something like FM3 running inside your application. Okay. Also, the composite keys can now in version 17 contain full Unicode information. So it's a full Unicode composite key which you can have now in your database system. And because some of your what do they call it, full text search keys, which you can also add, can have RTF or HTML information, you could in instances tell your indexes to disregard HTML and RTF formatting commands, which it finds inside the data which is stored in the tables. Another new feature in version 17 is the fact that it's fully IPv6 compliant, and also the HyperFileSQL Classic databases can be stored on iPhone and iPad, and the HyperFile client server can be accessed via Wi-Fi and 3G connections. This is the one I was looking for earlier. Then a very nice feature of the HyperFileSQL system and the Mantra server is the fact that you can mix W language functions and SQL functions together in the same queries. Now what I'll explain to you is, let's say for instance you've got a window or a table. So let's say we've got select table which is task.caption from task, where, and then you prefix your language functions with WL dot, which means there's a date difference language function which you add as part of your query. And if we look below the line, we create a data source and we execute a SQL query called task query, and the query is called select task.caption from the table called task, where, and we've got a language function with its parameter, which is great for people like me that are used to using a language and people that are used to using just SQL code. You can now mix the two together and get the best of both worlds. Okay, optimization. All your queries can be optimized either for execution time or for process time, and you can set that. Another very nice feature is after you've created an insert in a table, you could immediately get the ID of the newly inserted record just by issuing the command, the file name dot auto ID field name. And if I want to show that to you, I will just quickly go there. In the instance where we will be setting up this inside the HyperFileSQL system, they've got a thing called the automatic ID, and this automatic ID can be 4 bytes or 8 bytes, which is fine. And what we were talking about now is that if you insert a row into this table and you need to get this, ID, the value of the ID that's come back, you only issue the table name and the ID field. Let's see, where are we with this? So that's the table name and the ID field. And when using one of the bad sites, obviously everything's got a bad site, when using the insert, delete or update SQL statements in SQL queries, no integrity checks and no duplicate checks are performed by default on a HyperFileSQL database. You've got to go and do this yourself. And the reason for that is that originally HyperFileSQL databases did not accept SQL queries. It accepted W language functions. The Mantra server on top of HyperFileSQL, which gives the client server, is a later addition. Okay, and also what's very nice is with HyperFileSQL as part of the language runtime, which is the W language, you can prevent a data query from being interpreted through whatever data driver you are using by using a constant which tells it, send my query to the server backend precisely as I've written it. Do not try to change it. Do not try to be fancy with it and think you know better than what I do. So that's a quick rundown on HyperFileSQL and its capabilities. Now this is obviously not very exhaustive rundown. There are masses and masses of other information, but this gives a very short overview of HyperFileSQL and why you would maybe look at it and try and use it, especially if you're running it inside a WINDEV, WebDev or WINDEV mobile application. You don't have to go buy a separate mobile database. You don't have to worry about the database not being available on any of the possible platforms on which you can distribute your applications. It runs on all of them. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
All right. To let us all chime in on this, if you look at the multiple environments, the multiple iOSs that we work with or that we need to work with nowadays in the mobile, the web-based, as well as the desktop, there are some distinct advantages, and obviously Pete and Ben chime in whenever you're ready. Distinct advantages to look at least minimally 2 of these for your development environment, i.e. if I'm going to do mobile as well as AWP pages for the web-based web dev, HyperFileSQL or HyperFile Client Server is going to be part of that, especially when I'm doing iPhone apps or iPad apps as well as Android apps. If the entire functionality is there, okay, and 17 is coming out with the Android has the classic. Well, then I can utilize the synchronization tools to sync that to my MSSQL database or sync it to my Postgres.
Yes.
I can actually use something to do that with anyway.
Yes, definitely.
So I can, since it's an SQL 92, you can use those to sync it to your other more mainframe backend from either your Android or your iPhone or your iPad type application that you're building. So you can't just discount that because it reminds you of Mr. TPS. I think it's probably something to keep in mind strongly. Now, obviously, you can use SQLite on some of these tools, but I don't, again, that's another one that you have to deal with. So the HyperFile to me is something to keep that in mind. One of the questions Alan put out, I'd love to see a webinar on HyperFile sync to MySQL or MSSQL. Later on, when I get into the Android development, yes, you will see that. I will have that, okay? But there's going to be two different methods to do that. And the two different methods to do that is very simply, we're going to be not only may use this to do some testing with, but we'll also be using SOAP services back and forth.
Yes,
okay? So we may be using SOAP services with a local database.
The problem I have with SOAP services is the fact that it's actually open and not encrypted, unless you encrypt your data before you add it to the SOAP server, to the SOAP packet. Where with HyperFile, for instance, you could actually encrypt you could tell it that the connection should be encrypted. But remember, Andy, also, when we're talking about putting the HyperFileSQL on iOS environment or Android or Windows mobile environment, we're not talking about the client-server part of it. We're talking about the classic part, which is the actual original HyperFileSQL tables. And HyperFileSQL table, I just need to mention, where there is the index and the memos are separate or external to the actual database table. It's not combined all into one as TPS tables are.
Yeah, the biggest question that is going to have to be experimented with when you go to 17 is is that synchronization, though.
Yeah.
I really want to see that synchronization.
The other cool thing that HyperFile, even the HyperFile Classic, has there is that those tables are 100% upwards compatible. You can actually take the Classic tables, install Mantra on top of them. No data conversion, no nothing. Your underlying data format does not change whatsoever. So you can have client server and more of a flat file approach hitting the exact same database tables.
It actually reminds me more of, I mean, and now it escapes me. Back, 15, 20 years ago, what was the biggie one that you could go both to?
Pervasive.
Btrieve.
Btrieve?
Yes.
So Btrieve, yes, because you could access Btrieve directly, and then you could also do client server with Btrieve at the same time.
And you could corrupt your data almost as easily as you can TPS.
Yes, that's true. That was true. Yes, and Btrieve became pervasive. Yes. But you're absolutely correct. But you could corrupt them fairly quickly that way. But that's what it kind of reminds me of, is that same layer that you could go straight to it, do all your stuff, and then you could actually just take the same files and make a client server and pervasive allowed you to do SQL across the top. So the SQL part is a layer over the top of the database versus an integrated into the database, such as the other two are. So it's going to be interesting to deal with that. Now, one of the things that that the HyperFile client server that I did not see, and I don't know, Ben, if you can point that out, it looked like your triggers were basically point and click type triggers, not where you could hand write a trigger unless I missed that somewhere. Is that correct?
The triggers are actually not written inside the actual database, but it's written inside your application. And let me quickly open up that and show it to you.
So,
and then it's
I understand where you're going. That basically is back to the client side.
So what you do is within your analysis,
that is probably a little bit of a drawback.
You actually write it inside your analysis and then you upload it to the server. So
okay. So it still is on the server, but
yes. Now, okay, let's look at that. If I go there,
but you can't access your code trigger from the control center. You have to have the WINDEV IDE to do it.
Yes, which makes sense because the control center doesn't have a language checker or things like that, you know. So it makes sense to do the.
It's a little bit of a drawback from
Yes.
In the IDE.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a drawback because bottom line is that I can distribute a script out to 500 clients and update them without having to change my source code.
Yeah, but this isn't source code, right? This is almost like.
Yeah, it is, because even if you have it in here, when you generate your application, your analysis is part of your application.
Yeah.
So if you go in here and you create this, you're creating a layer over the top of your application.
The other thing is, you know, I'm on site and having some kind of an issue, I can go in through Studio and tweak a trigger and not have the IDE even with me. So I don't think it's a giant drawback, but it's definitely something to be aware of.
And yes, there's what if I went crazy and I said, man, I love this.
Sorry.
Hey, Andy and Pete.
Yeah.
My question is, what if I really got into the, you know, I believe Ben, and I went this route of HyperFileSQL, and I built all these triggers and stored procedures, and I upload. Then I realized one day I see a bat come in my way, and I go, you know what? I think I better go Postgres, right? How easy would it be for me to move from this to Postgres?
I don't know.
Or to MSSQL, for that matter.
I would safely say this, that when you're talking about data-wise, it's probably not as difficult as it would be your trigger, stored procedure, and you know, referential integrity type code-wise. And the reason for that, you know, is fairly straightforward. Number one is you're writing the triggers and stored procedures in here as WL language. So you're writing everything in WINDEV. I can use WINDEV functions. I can use whatever I want in it.
That's where the advantage is going to become a disadvantage of the simple fact that you've got a more verbose, feature-rich language. You're going to use some of those features in your triggers, and then if you try to move it to Postgres, MSSQL, you're going to run into functions that don't exist.
So it's a translation problem.
True, yeah.
Right.
You see, Pete, if you look
now on the other hand,
oh, sorry. Sorry, I just want to
go ahead.
I just want to answer Pete on the updating of the stored procedures and triggers. When you go into the control center and you go to the stored procedures, you can actually update the set, and all you need to do is distribute the analysis, not a complete program. But the downside is you still need your IDE to update the analysis. But you wouldn't want somebody else to just go into your database and go and change stored procedures and triggers without your knowledge, would you?
No, we don't do that either.
Depends, you know. It depends.
You got to have a special password for all that.
Yeah, no. So yes, I see the downside of having to do it in the IDE, but I also see an opportunity of, hey, Pete, you could make some money here, eh?
Now, on the other hand, like converting from MS-SQL to Postgres, you can open any stored procedure as you want, as a not as T-SQL, but as a different type of SQL. Let me get let me open one up.
Okay, Andy, you want to?
The actual, but it actually gives them more.
You want the screen?
No, we're all right. It's all right. It actually gives it more as a different type of script, so you can move it more towards Postgres or more towards Oracle. And that's one thing it does give you. So I can actually open it differently. Because I haven't done that in a long time. Oh, no, I remember that. I'm sorry. I'm even looking at the wrong language. That was Sybase. I could do that. No, I'm sorry. MS-SQL doesn't allow you either. I'm sorry. A Sybase used to be, or can do that. Can open it up as either an MS-SQL type syntax or the normal Sybase.
I tried. Oracle actually has a tool that is supposed to convert T-SQL to PL-SQL, and I used the tool and found out very quickly that I could rewrite them much better than using the tool. When we did our big conversion, it took us 6 weeks to convert a very large application, 240 tables, 21 app files, 300 stored procedures. It took us 6 weeks to convert both the Clarion app and the database, all the stored procedures, and that was with me and 2.5 junior programs.
Obviously, he was working.
It was most of the. Oops. Who wants? Okay, so we're
no, go ahead.
Time up. But let's see. Is there any other questions? What's the main difference between HF Classic and HF Client Server? Oh, and he just closed the screen, didn't he?
Alan, the main difference between the two is very simply the Classic is the straightforward access to the files, basically the same as going to TPS. The HF Client Server is you're accessing those same Classic files via SQL syntax as an overall layer.
I think, once again, the harp on the point, there really is not a difference. It's two different methods of getting to the exact same data and files.
Correct.
You don't have to choose one over the other.
Yeah, like Ben said, it's like
you don't.
Driver hitting the TPS file or the
right.
Yes.
Right.
With a Classic, if you've got multiple computers on a network, you would do it via shared drives or shared or mapped drives, and with a client server, you would do it via TCP/IP connection.
Right. One other thing, and for anybody out there, for all of our buddies, Clarion Group, I know most of them have already abandoned us. But for those that may be reviewing this later, I want to show you one thing. We want to talk about this because this will be in the future.
On the test?
Yes. Go ahead and give me the screen.
Yes, Wolfgang, that's correct. You can't have stored procedures in Classic. Only in the client server.
Oh, that's a big difference.
Well, where would you store it?
Right. Yeah, you got to have something to put it in.
Yeah, that stored procedures is the definition of client server.
Well, that wasn't obvious to me, so thank you for asking that.
Mm-hmm. What I want to show you here, this is a Clarion program. Okay. Here, not too long ago, and hopefully everybody can see the program now. And I want to minimize everything else and get it out of the way. Here a while ago, we had an issue that come up and was talking about how, number one, how can you convert an application or one that's been in there and fairly in there for Clarion application and over to WINDEV. Okay, that's number one. And one of the things that came up in all the chat forums and things like this is well, how do you call WINDEV from Clarion, or how can you access WINDEV from Clarion? One of the things that was out there was a external languages system that was how to access WINDEV using their OLI and Pascal. Okay, so now this is derived directly to the individuals that are now having to bounce between Clarion and WINDEV, or still maintaining a Clarion program and wish to hell they could go to WINDEV and start doing it with a lot more ease, things like this. What we did as far as Tire Power is concerned is that we contracted with someone and had them build us the interface inside of Clarion for the Pascal program. So what I'm fixing to show you here, and we kind of I hinted about this a while back, where we're calling WINDEV programming from Clarion, is that is now working. So if I click on the estimator, when I click on this button, we are actually opening up a WINDEV window that goes out and is using the HTML control to operate a system out there called Activent that we deal with that lets us do job costing and job functionality out there is what it does. So we are actually running, I'm actually running a HTML page out of WINDEV inside of Clarion and allowing that to run, and we are definitely controlling the whole thing from Clarion. Now what's this mean? Well, this means that I am going to be able to literally run the entire program. That's good, Andy. Something got in the way because I've been using this. We're going to be able to generate and generate WINDEV programs and be able to use this code to do that with. Okay. And that allows us to basically start writing our reports in WINDEV, start writing other windows in WINDEV, and call them from Clarion directly. And let me show you the code, because I think I can do this. Let's see here. I'll have to close this one, and I'll bring it over. I got a 64-bit machine, so I'm using the virtual.
So Andy, it's not
VMware
necessarily converting everything over, but you might be taking advantage of some pretty good features that WINDEV might have that Clarion doesn't have now or have. That you're interfacing, but for your case, it's a transition. Uh-oh. Did we lose?
Yes, and one of the first things that I would do is I'd actually use WINDEV's reporting. Seriously, there's
Yes,
no
absolutely.
comparison there.
Absolutely agree 100% with that. I would never write a report in Clarion if I had a hammer and chisel handy.
Wolfgang,
WINDEV
the way that
reports
I
are
do
so
it
great.
is, yeah, no, the reports are fantastic. Wolfgang, the way that I access it is I've installed the TPS ODBC driver, and my WinDev and WebDev programs access TPS files via the ODBC driver. Andy back.
Oops. Andy, can you talk now?
Yes, can you hear me now? Okay. Looks like running VMware twice does a really bad things when it comes to Adobe Connect. So be careful about that.
Tell me about it. I did that just earlier before you.
Yeah, I'm gonna open up and I'm just gonna show you the code that was called to be able to do this. We had a class wrapper built to do this, and it really wasn't that hard to do. So to go from there, and so I'm going to show you real quickly how that worked, so that way everybody has a chance to use it. And I had this here, so I want to be able to.
While he's doing that, Ben, it sounds like you're almost using WinDev as your report designer, or kind of like a report writer.
We're going to. We literally are going to start rewriting all the reports for that.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Because I've got some very large applications that's moving over piecemeal. One of the things is move some of the reports over, get some of the new report formatting in, then start moving some of the tables over and put new functionality in the WinDev apps, and then starting, and then connecting the lot together, So yeah, unfortunately for Wolfgang, I'm only doing it at one client, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's
Go ahead,
not
Pete.
an all or nothing proposition. It's
no.
You can mix and match and start using some of the newest, best features that are going to free up your time. Because like Ben says, the time and energy it takes me to develop a report or maintain a report in Clarion versus WinDev, that's time that if I save that time doing them in WinDev, I can place to converting other stuff and moving other stuff. So it's about using the best tool for the best job to start maximizing your potential.
Okay. To kind of go over this code just a little bit, like I said, we built a class for it. The first thing you have to do is you have to load the WDLL. That WDLL is an exported thing, and we'll go through this when I build a whole application, but you load that, then I'm opening the window. I need to pass it some parameters, and the easiest way to pass those parameters is literally I'm adding into a list box on the other side the parameters is what I'm doing. I'm adding those parameters on the fly. So I'm adding in the transaction ID, the vehicle, and the site ID. I'm telling it what control I want. I'm selecting that control here. That's what that's for. Then I say that screen first, and while I loop, I'm doing screen input. And all that's doing is sitting there waiting to see whether or not that I get the key. Yeah.
Andy, are you using the just-in-time compiler on the WINDEV side for this?
No. Is it a compiled
So you're not
program?
using the code? Yes, but even a compiled program can at runtime compile and run W language statements, like you know. So are you using a?
No, I'm not using any of that. No, this is actually calling when you do an executable. Okay, as you can see, I'm fixing to compile this. This is that window. I'm going to compile this. When you do this, one of the statements that you can do when you get through your switches here, and let me find the correct one, is don't include the framework in the executable. Okay? That's one of them. And let's see here. There's one I'm missing here. That's not it. We're not. Let me get back in there again. There's one that the framework is one of them, but you also can tell it to, there it is, external use of the main library. Okay? When you do the external use of the main library, what that does is literally creates a WDL. That's what that is right there. Okay, and that basically is your program. Now,
not even that
key things to know about this is that if I'm opening one certain window in there, nothing else runs. Everything you're doing has to be in that window. You can call other things from that window, but your connection information, everything else that you usually put in your project side ain't going to be in there. You're not accessing it. You can't get to it. Okay? So you create that gets copied into the Clarion directory, and then when you're running the Clarion stuff, that's what I'm calling. That's the WDLL I'm calling right there. Then I'm opening the window that I want, and then I'm adding in the pieces to that window. And as you can see from this, there's the list box right there that I'm adding those elements to. Okay? That's what I'm doing, is I'm adding those elements directly to that list box. Now, what that allows us to do, to be honest with you, I can literally start developing browsers and forms and list boxes, whatever I want, and call them directly from Clarion as we move forward with the project. And I'm going to be expanding upon this as I go through it. I certainly am going to be expanding upon it. But that allows you to do that fairly simply from Clarion with one little short interface. Okay? So if anybody really has to say, I'm willing to do this, but I can't do it all at once, an all or nothing situation, convert to WINDEV, let me know. I'll certainly show you how.
Andy, so is that an interface like to a like just one quote unquote procedure, or could be almost a whole
one window, one procedure,
one window, or one report, or something?
Yes. So if I was running reports, one of the things that we do in our reports is we have a window that is open for the reports. Okay. And it allows you to and let me kind of show you how that works. So what I'm going to be building, or what's going to be building before long, is just a second here, I'll fire that up. And is when I want to do the windows, or when I do the reports, I would give the one that don't have the reports. Let me do the other one. Office has most of the reports. When I do the reports, we come up with a window like this that has all of the different reports. So we have tabs. This is our reporting engine, basically. So what I'm going to be doing is redoing this window. Okay? And this window here will then call the correct report of whatever we want to do. Okay, so we'll have a new window with the interface for the reports, with the setup of the different report types, the different type report system and stuff like that. Boom! From there, you can then write all the reports in WINDEV from there. That's the way we're doing it. Okay.
Andy?
Yeah.
This functionality that you're explaining to us now, is this purchasable from you?
Yes, and the only reason
you spend time, yeah.
Yeah, well, the only reason it's going to be buyable, if I had built it myself, it would be free of charge. I'd probably give it to y'all. But the company had to pay for the conversion from the Pascal to be able to use that in Clarion. So we're charging a little nominal fee of about $50, and I'll give you everything and help you how to work it and get it running, and you guys can have at it. And I'm going to write a little example program too. But the only reason we're doing that is because the company had to pay about $1,500 or so to get it workable for us. So we need to give the company back some money, so that way Barry won't get all upset that we're giving away things that he paid for. But that's the only reason.
$50 that would include you convincing George that I should be able to use it?
Well, convincing George is not your problem. George is the easy one. It's not George. It would be
CIO in Miami. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Tim. It would be the next one above George. Now, remember, George is just a working stiff like the rest of us. Arnold, you can pay my PayPal. PayPal.
Because I'm looking at Wolfgang's problem now, and this would actually then go around the other way. Is if Wolfgang wants to do a partial conversions, then he could convert some of the stuff, like for instance the reporting, to WINDEV, yes, and actually call it from Clarion, and right, and actually pass the data through to the WINDEV application, instead of the WINDEV application reading it from TPS files.
Yes. Well, I think he would still have an issue, to do true reporting and so forth. You wouldn't be able to pass that kind of data, so he'd still have the issues of the fact that.
Well, he could pass an instance of the data for the report.
Well, can I?
Right, but at that point, you've already done a lot of the data work of your report, so you're going to lose some of the advantage of the WINDEV reporting.
Yeah.
So okay, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Like, what if I, like right now I grab data and I roll it up and stuff and I put it into a IMDD, okay? So if I do the same thing, instead of to the IMDD, I go put it into a hyperfile, then when I call the hyperfiles, my WINDEV, I can read that hyperfile, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, if you package your data up into something else, then you've gotten around that issue.
Yeah, since I use MSSQL, it's easy.
Okay. Any other?
It just makes it. It's going to make it simple as we move forward. Certainly going to make it simple, and it's one of the advantages. We did do the COM object. Was able to call it via the COM object through the .NET, but we had a few difficulties in getting back information the way we really wanted to, and that was a problem. So we kind of backed off that idea, and this one here gave us the greatest flexibility for what we wanted, because now I can call any window in WINDEV that I build and go from there, which is really what I wanted to do. That's just throwing that out there. So if anybody really wants to, give me a holler. We'll do it and take care of that and go from there.
Arnold, that's an idea, but some of my reports.
Yeah, because I'll definitely be using it on some of the Clarion client apps, which is connecting to the new WINDEV server app and connect to the actual WINDEV SOAP server.
Yeah.
With a WINDEV SOAP client, and then have the Clarion app called the WINDEV SOAP client, you know?
Well, that's the only thing. That's any other questions or anything we can throw at it, we'll certainly look at it. Wolfgang.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks,
Andy.
Andy.
Is typing
Yeah,
again, so.
When is this going to be available? In the next month or two, or?
You're in for the call bridge interface. Yes, I agree, bro. Okay. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Huh? I says,
Arnold?
when are you going to make it available? Are you going to package it up in the next month or two, or?
Right now, and I'll be strictly honest with you guys, is that we're up against the wall to get something finished having to deal with this. It's called the Act Event, and as soon as I get a breath after that, I will make up the little dummy application in Clarion, calling a WINDEV like customer list with a form, you know, something basically simple, and get it all packaged up real quick that way, okay, with an installation. So I would say that quite possibly by the end of the month, but maybe in the first week of next month or so, we'll be ready for it, okay?
Okay. I'm not in a rush, but I just kind of get a timetable. Good.
Well, it's kind of one of those deals there where, you know, the reason why we built this is because we've got a huge deal sitting on the table to get it out first, and obviously the boss man's not going to want me to spend time on that.
I'll test the heck out of it, though. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, anybody? Type your questions in there. Otherwise, we should call it a wrap.
Thanks for y'all spending Saturday with us.
Yep. Or listen to us later.
Yeah, and thanks for putting up with Pete and Ben.
Especially.
Yes. Especially on a Sunday, eh?
Yes, that would be true if you're down under.
Yes.
All right.